Thank you so much for spending time with your words and the playlist, which, if I say it so myself, is fantastic. Yes, it was me who made it. I hope you enjoy it. So I'm very, very excited to introduce today Melania Luisa Marte, who we're all here to celebrate and be in community with. She is a writer, poet, and musician from New York, living between the Dominican Republic and Texas. Her viral poem, Afro Latina, was featured by Instagram on their IGTV for National Poetry Month and has garnered over 9 million views. It is a fantastic poem and performance. If you haven't seen it yet, please make sure to check that out. Her work has also been featured by Ain't I Latina, Afropunk, The Root, Teen Vogue, Telemundo, Refinery 29, Pop Sugar, and elsewhere. So of course, we're in space with fantastic, fantastic poets and artists. So please, please, please put your hands together, whether that's your virtual or your regular hands, put your hands together and help me welcome Melania Luisa Marte. Amazing.
Hi, everyone. I'm so sorry that I'm a little late to the party. I'm in a little bit of traffic here. I'm traveling to LA for the LA Book Fest that's starting today and tomorrow. But I'm excited to be here. Just bear with me. My service is going to be a little shaky as I'm in traffic. Can
Thank you.
everyone hear me?
Yes, for sure. And thank you so much for
Okay.
explaining that. Do not worry about it. I'm just so grateful that you're here and that you're even amongst this traffic. Here. So would you like to walk us through your professional journey?
Yes, so I started writing poetry since I was a kid. I've always loved poetry, but it really started when I was about 6 or 7 years old. I spent a summer in the Dominican Republic with my family, with my abuelita, and my cousin Maciel, who lived with my grandmother at the time. She used to write, she was like 12 or 13, and she used to write her little boyfriend love letters. And there was a specific poem that I found in her notebook, and it said something about a boy under a mango tree. And that's I thought the poem was beautiful, and I had sort of scribbled my own version of the poem. And when I took it back home, my mom was very upset, and she was just like, ¿Qué andabas haciendo? Like, were you kissing boys under mango trees? You're 7 years old. Like, it's so inappropriate. And it really sort of inspired me because I was just like, whoa, like poetry can get me in this much trouble with my mother. Like, this is a big deal. I need to figure out what it is about poetry that has her so upset. And that sort of began my journey into just, discovering poetry. And I would go to my local library as a kid and I would read poetry books. And I would just immerse myself in literature and in the arts, and slowly started figuring out what my voice was, and what I wanted to write about, and what stories mattered to me. And so that inspired me to then, when I was in college, to continue writing. And when I ended up leaving college, I decided to go into slam poetry. And from there, I kept at it. A few of my poems went viral, some opportunities came my way, and I decided that this is what I wanted to do. So I sort of challenged myself to come up with a collection of poetry. And this is how we have Plantains and Our Becoming. Sorry, let me just mute my messages. So sorry. So that I'm not getting messages as we're speaking. Yes. And that sort of became my journey into Plantains and Our Becoming. And Plantains and Our Becoming was inspired by a lot of my upbringing in New York City, going to the Dominican Republic in the summertime. And I just had so many questions about what it meant to be a first generation American, what it meant to sort of not fit into any molds. Everyone say hi to my toddler who's having a temper tantrum. Rio, tranquilo. And it sort of began this unraveling and this journey of just trying to figure out who I was as a writer, what stories I wanted to tell, and how I wanted to tell them, whether it was in poetry or now that I'm writing a novel, just figuring out what my lane is and going, unafraid and just delivering those stories to help inspire other generations to know that these are in the libraries, their stories are in the bookstores, and they are not alone. So yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing that. It's such a beautiful story, and clearly it has birthed such a beautiful book that I'm really happy to have here. I would love to invite you to read some. So I know you're on your phone right now, and it might be a little
Yeah.
tricky.
So I
Uh,
have one, I was able to copy and paste one poem into the chat that I'm actually gonna, it's Abuelita's Garden, because I know we were discussing the garden poem. So I can definitely share that one, but unfortunately I don't have my book. It's in my luggage. But
okay,
I can share that poem for you guys. One
that's good.
moment.
Mhm.
Can you still see me on the screen?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, awesome. Okay, here it is. Abuelita's Garden. Dios te me bendiga are her first words to her garden. Early mornings, after the roosters are done preaching and the dogs have stretched downward and long, their spines a half moon of fur and muscle, the birds chirp in search of crumbs and water. Pebbling through air and ground, they find Abuelita's basket of scraps left out for them to feed. In her garden, there is always something for someone to feed. No thing is left homeless. Dios te me bendiga. She glides through her garden, broom in hand, a thing hugging leaves and slim branches, an upended bouquet of shrub, greenery embracing a saged wooden pole. Everything about this woman could decompose and leave not a sight of ruin. I admire that. How much of this earth she honors and will one day become. There is a lesson in humility only those who have seen the bottom of an empty stomach can fathom. There is a lesson in survival only those who have seen the earth turn over and spill its fruits can witness. Mouth dry and aching, many have found solace in my abuelita's garden. A water apple, a warm cup of coffee, a sweet sour sop, green bananas, a buttery avocado, an earthy cup of dragon tea, the world's best mangoes. Her garden is a multivitamin. His breakfast or dinner, each disciple lucky for the harvesting season, my abuelita, the apothecary, the curandera, the cook, Dios se me bendiga. After the wilderness is done rejoicing, it's her time to speak of God in miracles. Her plants dewy and grateful. Here is a mother who loves them as if they were birthed from her womb and just as wise as the earth they rose from. Abuela affirms them before the sun affirms some more. Dios te me bendiga, mi negra bella, mi poeta, mi semilla, mi bendecida. Her blessings are a garden of endless love. They tell me, live because you sprung from me. Live because I dare you to live and thrive. Thrive because the birds, the flowers, the reptiles, we all want to witness your glory. Abuelita's garden is my favorite reminder that you don't need to be one specific kind of magical to bloom. We are all becoming our best, greenest thing. We slouch and freeze. We stunt and cry. We look up and there's a star warming our skin. There is a hand blessing our flesh. From dust to depression, we become. From twirls and teachings, we rejoice. Dios se me bendiga. And we all bloom. So that's the poem.
Oh my goodness. It's another level to like hear you and watch you perform this poem. Thank you for
Thank you.
that,
And I
truly.
wish I had my book to keep sharing the poems for you all, but
No, life happens and it is what it is. We're just like as I said, we're just so grateful that you still make time today and you're taking the time to spend some time with our community. So are you ready to work on some writing prompts with the team?
yes, 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 yes.
Okay, so Emily will share the screen and then we can start with the first writing prompt.
All right. So our first writing prompt is tell me about a time you had to stick up for a friend. And for those of you who have the book, if you have it, this was inspired by the poem On Colorism. And On Colorism is a poem where I talk about me having to stick up for a friend to a friend. And it was sort of defending this idea that, because we have different skin colors, that we should be treating each other in different ways, depending on the stereotypes that are put upon us. And so when I say, tell me about a time you had to stick up for a friend, I mean, like, what did you have to do, right? and also like what were the circumstances, right? What was the aggression? Where was the aggression happening? You know, where did you feel the aggression happening? What made you want to intervene? Yeah. So our second is write yourself a poem about all the reasons you are rooting for your success in life. So this is obviously inspired by what it means to root yourself, but it also means what it means to root yourself up, like root yourself down, right? Plant yourself in the soil. But in order to grow, you have to root yourself. You have to cheer yourself on. So I'm excited to hear what y'all come up with. Yes, I just want to say how beautiful these poems were, and thank you all for just going with your heart, going with your spirit, and honoring so many of the reasons why you want to stay rooted and why you want to continue to root for yourself, and allowing yourself to sort of heal a lot of those generational traumas and those generational stories that, although maybe touching and inspiring, are also, difficult stories. And so I am excited for you all to continue writing those stories and writing your lineage on the page.
Thank you so much, Melania. So as I said, we are now moving into our Q&A section. The slides will be taken down, and you guys will have the opportunity to, as we've been doing throughout the salon, you can raise your hand, you can mute yourself, or write something in the chat if you have any questions for Melania.
I have a question. I'm slowly getting into like poetry more. I've been more of a writer before, and I've always wondered with poetry, like it has such a concise use and selection of words and language. How do you like what's your process for writing a poem? You could go through many drafts? Is it like you just like spit it all out at once mostly? Like what's your process like?
Yeah, so my process for writing is multiple things. Depends on the poem I'm writing. For example, in part two of the collection, a lot of the poems required me to do research because I wanted to understand a little bit more about the history on the island of the Dominican Republic and Haiti. But it all depends on where I want to go with the story. So for example, if I'm writing a poem that's sort of my own story, and that is a particular, a deep sort of wound or something that I want to discuss, I try to really jot down what comes first to mind and why I want to write the poem. And then I from there sort of build the world around the poem. And I suggest every writer find what works for them. For example, some writers like to do a lot of research before they write. Some writers like to read other people's work to get inspired before they write. Some writers like to listen to music. I think doing a little bit of everything works for me. Um, but I do know writers who have to get inspired, right? They have to go into nature, or they have to do some research, or they have to do, everyone has their different form and their different sort of uh, discipline of writing. And I encourage you to try everything. Try anything that sparks inspiration and creativity. Try that first. And then look at what the other writers are doing for inspiration. But really go with what inspires you to write.
Thank you.
Hey, I want to bring some attention to questions in the chat. So Faria asked, what's your process for writing? Well, actually, this was just, you just answered this. So thank you so much. I hope this answered your question, but if you'd like anything more specific, please also send that in the chat. Then have Merle, I've heard poetry is hard to make a living out of. How do you face these challenges?
Yes, it is very difficult to make a living out of. So one of the first things I recommend is that if you are in academia, obviously, there are a lot of grants out there for writers that are really helpful. A lot of my friends have been able to sustain themselves with, getting grants while they're writing their collections and writing novels and things like that. Another thing I recommend is that you always have a side hustle. until you make it as a full-time writer. Like, don't ever just rest on your laurels and think that the money's just going to come to you, because it's not. It's very, I mean, we know now more than ever, because of all of the DEI and bans on books, that things are becoming really dire for writers. But the economy is also something that we're all battling. And so this is a really difficult time to be an artist. But one of the things that I recommend is for you to be clear on where you want to go with your writing. Do you want to do commercial work, right? Do you want to write for commercials? Do you want to write, do you want to be ghostwriter until you get your, your foot in the door, and then you write your own stories? Do you want to, like, what kind of writer do you want to be? What kind of poet do you want to be? Do you want to be a poet who teaches? Do you want to be a poet who tours and does colleges and universities? I happen to do a little bit of everything. I've done commercial work. I obviously have my collection of poems. I'm working on a novel. I've also done worked with different brands and organizations and social media companies, and then I've also done touring in colleges and universities. And so a little bit of everything has worked for me. But like I said, it's like, what do you where do you want to put your energy? Because there are many different ways, selling merch, selling your books, getting a publisher, a big 5 publisher, that's an option. So it's all about figuring out what works for you.
That's some fantastic answers. So thank you for being so thorough and so honest as well, just being so honest about your answers. So thank you. All right, so we have a few more questions we have from Heidi. How did you deal with rejections from submissions growing up and motivation to pitch again? Take your time. Do not even worry about it.
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, can hear you.
Okay, sorry, I'm just getting out of my car, my Uber. What the best way to deal with rejection is to just deal with it. Everyone has their you're gonna get your feelings hurt in any industry, especially in something that requires your creativity. You're gonna get your feelings hurt, but it's important to not think that makes up who you are. Your art isn't meant to be for everyone. Not everyone is going to agree or enjoy it. Sorry, give me 1 second. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. Yeah, and so my biggest advice for just putting your work out there and submitting your work and pursuing your art is to be unashamed and to just be very secure in what you want to write, why you want to write, and what you want to write. And then you'll find your way there. But you have to be secure in what you want to write, and you have to be secure in why you want to write it. Like, what drives you to write, and what is it that you want to do with your writing? Because you can't really base it off of other people. You have to figure out what works for you.
Yeah, thank you so much for saying that. And you're right about feeling secure in your work, because of course you'll get your feelings hurt. But if you're secure and
Yeah.
confident in what you're creating, then it's all going to be worth it. So thank you so much for saying that. All right, so I have 2 more questions. Another one from Heidi, and then Maya, I'll pass it along to you. So are there any programs or resources you would recommend for those of us just starting out in poetry?
Sorry, could you repeat the question? I couldn't hear you.
Yeah, definitely. So are there any programs or resources you would recommend for those of us just starting out in poetry? And this is from Heidi Lippe.
If you're starting out in poetry, I think you're already doing a great job because you're connected to girls right now. So I think that's a great start for you, is to sort of figure out where you want to go with that. And then I also recommend, thank you. I also recommend that you find folks in your community who are doing poetry, like local poetry organizations, local writing organizations, because you do want to have friends in the community, because that'll inspire you to keep writing. And then I also recommend that you reach out to, finding or, events happening. For example, um, Poetry Foundation and, different poetry magazines that you love, right? Figuring out what kind of poetry you enjoy, what kind of stories you want to tell, and going from there. But I think it's super important when you're starting out as a poet to first cement yourself within your community and get to know the poets in your local community, and find a mentor, find mentorship. That's really important.
Yeah, thank you. And as you said, they're doing great because there are girls right now. So mentorship.
Exactly.
Alrighty, so Maya, you'd like to unmute yourself and share your question.
Yes, I was wondering, you sort of mentioned like generational trauma, and earlier you had shared the story of, finding the letter and your mom's response of like, oh my goodness, why is a little girl writing about this? And I was just wondering, I think with any sort of nonfiction work or art that is inspired by lived experiences, there can be that tension with the people that are a part of your lived experiences. And so I wondered just about the specific challenges that come with, um, yeah, being a person of color and generational trauma and telling your story through your poetry. Like, have you felt any pressures or with like representing certain people in your life in a certain way, or I don't know. Yeah, anything
Yeah,
sort of related to that.
yeah, I know what you mean. It's a super vulnerable thing when you're telling stories, especially if you're telling stories of family members and you're talking about different experiences. And there is definitely that conversation you have to have with family members, especially if they're going to run into reading your work. You want to make sure that it doesn't damage your relationships, obviously, but also understanding that your truth is your truth. And if it's something that is you're being called to express, then you shouldn't be afraid of it, right? Because your truth is your truth. But yeah, it is very, you have to tread lightly. You have to be very empathetic. And as I always say, it's so important to humanize our family and humanize our loved ones, and to understand that they are imperfect and human just like us. And I try not to, maybe I have before, but I try not to pedestal anyone. I also try not to demean anyone. And I try to see them as full human beings who make mistakes and, should be held accountable, but are human and deserve and are worthy of empathy just like everyone else.
Thank you, Melania. That was a beautiful answer. And we're gonna end it with Adrian. You can unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hi, first of all, I really love your collection. It means a lot to me. My dad's Dominican, and so I'm first generation Dominican American on my dad's side, and it was just like things I didn't even know I needed to hear, but I did. So yeah, just want to say that first. But also, I guess like to me, so much of the collection is so unapologetically Dominican. And I guess I wonder, like, as someone raised in the States and being Dominican American, how do you manage to find I guess, like the courage to let yourself be unapologetically Dominican specifically? Also, because I think when it comes to, if we talk about Latino representation, Dominicans, it's funny because there's a lot of us in the States, but like, I feel like there isn't as much representation for Dominicans specifically in like stories and media. So I guess like, how do you find that, the courage and the confidence to do that?
Yeah, no, I get asked this question a lot, and I honestly sometimes I don't know what to say because I think it has to just something that drives you. It could be that you are just sick of there not being enough representation. It can be, I feel like for me, it's like all of the above. I feel like I was sick of not seeing enough representation. I was sick of my stories not being told in the ways that my community deserve for them to be told, which is with respect and authenticity and full dimensionality. But I have always loved my people, and I've always loved my community, and I've always wanted to give them grace, right? And I've always wanted to see more of our stories. And so you have to get fed up. You have to be like, if not me, then who? And if not now, then when? You know, and you have to push yourself to say, our stories are enough. Our stories are enough to be told, and our stories are deserving to be told. And we have to be the ones to tell them. And it's sort of, you kind of feel sort of crazy, and you sort of feel like there's so much to do, and there's so much, you know, more stories and more characters and more of us that need to be in the rooms and have seats at the table. But if you don't push yourself to put your work out there, it's not going to happen, right? And so I just had to be really brave and very secure, and just stay inspired and stay within my community, and keep telling our stories. And that's what I can tell you, is that we are worthy of our stories being told, and your stories are just as important as mine. There is no wrong way to enter this industry. It's really just you saying, I want my stories told, and I'm going to work really hard to make them happen, and I'm going to polish my work and make it as polishable as possible, right? As without diluting its essence, right? So that the reader can still see bits of our communities in ways in which they haven't before.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's a perfect way to end this Q&A, honestly. If it's not you, then who? Then who will? You know what I mean? Thank you so much, Melania. That
Thank you
the
guys. Thank
poetry
you
is
all.
as phenomenal as the words that just naturally come out of your mouth. So thank you so much for just sharing your wisdom and your words and reading that poem for us. It was so beautifully read. Thank you so much. All right, so if you want to stay in touch with Melania Luisa Marte, you can follow her on Instagram, Mela Toca Tierra. Also check out her Dembow on Spotify if you have not listened to that yet.
Thank you, girl.
Fantastic.
Thank you. It was such an honor. Such an honor. Thank you all.
Thank you so much. You can also find her on X, the same as her Instagram. And if you'd like to get in contact with her through email, info@melanialuisa.com. All right, and just make sure to follow us on social media. Girls Right Now across the board. You can find us there. And just again, thank you so much for joining us this evening. I know life is lifing, but the fact that you took the time to be here in community with us and to write means everything. And Melania, again, thank you, thank you, thank you. All right, y'all have a beautiful night. Thank you so much for being here.